I want to start, though, talking about New York. In my career, I have laughed. I've lived my whole life pretty much in Boston, Washington, and New York, but I'm extremely sensitive to the perception and the reality that people in New York, including people in the media and Washington, focus too much on those places. New York is a great city. It's my home, but it's not the beginning and end of the whole world. Usually stories here are overcovered. I think the story of this election here for mayor of New York that has positioned a previously unknown gentleman named Zohran Mamdani to be the mayor is a huge story. And it's a huge story for not just New York or people who like politics, but it's a huge story for the country. And I'll tell you why in just a moment, why the similarities between Mamdani and Donald Trump are so significant. I'm a resident of this city. I'm raising my son here. I care a lot about who the mayor is. We've had good mayors and bad mayors, and it's about quality of life for a lot of people. And for the wealthiest New Yorkers, some of whom have left this state and this city to move to places like Florida where they don't pay income tax, quality of life is to not have to step over a homeless person when you're seeing a Broadway show. That's a reality. But for most New Yorkers, quality of life is, can you afford to send your kids to camp, or afford the drugs they need, or be able to rent or own a home, or to take transportation? This city is really expensive. Eric Adams, the incumbent mayor of this city, says he's going to run for re-election. He'll be on the general election ballot as an independent. I'm skeptical. The business community doesn't know what to do. They don't like Mamdani, but he's likely to be the next mayor. I think the chances that he's the next mayor are pretty high. And so as a resident, I hope he does well. He's not an orthodox candidate. And so in thinking about how to understand why the Democratic voters of this city chose Mamdani, I came across an idea that I want to share with you now, which is the similarities he has with Donald Trump. Zohran Mamdani and Donald Trump, they couldn't be more different in so many ways, but that's at first glance. One of them, of course, the bronze billionaire from Queens, his hair like spun sugar. He's a guy born with a gold telephone already in his hand, and whose idea of public service was once memorably described as self-service. The other, Mamdani, is a Ugandan Indian-American democratic socialist who lives in Astoria, Queens, who knocked off a political dynasty by beating Andrew Cuomo with very little more than a clipboard, a conviction, and a killer instinct for this new media moment. They are wildly different in so many ways, but they are also avatars of the same disruptive energy that has turned American politics into a choose-your-own reality streaming service. They are similar. Here's why. They both began as outsiders. Mamdani got elected to the state assembly in New York just 5 years ago. He'd never held public office before then. If he was known at all, people knew him as a housing activist and a rapper more than they thought of him as any sort of political force. Neither of them had paid the traditional dues usually required to win these big jobs. Both of them were told when they decided to enter the races they did that they were not serious contenders. And of course, both astonishingly won. Donald Trump the presidency, Mamdani the Democratic nomination for mayor here. And both won by harnessing movements that were bubbling and then exploded like volcanoes. They were arrayed against the status quo, and they fought for what they both described as the forgotten men and women of the working class. Both of them saw the opportunity to play off the moneyed dynasties that they were running against. In the case of Trump, that was the Bushes and the Clintons. In the case of Mamdani, it's Mario Cuomo's son, Andrew Cuomo. They used them effectively as foils. Now, look, it would be cheap to lump them together as just calling them populists, but there is also a shared talent for identifying what used to be called kitchen table issues. Trump, of course, with his carnivalesque language, gave voice to the white working class and working class voters in general, disillusioned by the trends, globalization, the devastation from opioid addiction, and the coastal sneering that so many Americans felt. Mamdani, on the other hand, he speaks up for the renters of Queens, the gig workers, the stressed parents, and the subway riders with too many delays and too few champions here in New York City or in our capital of Albany. Whenever Mamdani talks about housing as a human right, or he talks about transit justice, it lands for voters not as a theory, but as the basics: groceries, rent, asthma medication. So in that way, both Trump and Mamdani has mastered the art of the simple and sticky message. Trump talks about make America great again. Mamdani has a brand of democratic socialism that skips over the jargon. It heads straight to the people's gut. Both men possess what I call postmodern flair. They wink at the camera. They know they're in a show, and they make that clear, and they invite you, the viewer or the voter, to know it as well. Trump turned politics into a form of professional wrestling, shouting insults, breaking norms, mocking the sacred with the profane. Mamdani, though, also plays with performance. He quotes serious historical figures in one moment, and then the next he'll drop a TikTok video with meme-perfect comic timing. He wears his ideology right on his sleeve, sometimes quite literally, in the form of branded jackets or tax the rich merch. But he never lets you forget that he's in on the meta joke of modern politics, just like Trump. Both of them break the fourth wall. Trump calling into cable news shows unannounced in 2016, altering the news cycle whenever he wanted on a whim with a social media post. Mamdani, very similar. He records Instagram videos that directly address his constituents. They have all the production value of a well-funded college activist group, and yet somehow they work because he, like Trump, knows that message discipline in the 21st century means being the message yourself, loving social media, and making real life and social media rhyme in some sort of synchronistic tandem. Their critics scoff. They call it unserious or narcissistic or both. But what their critics miss, and they missed it with Trump back in 2016, and they're missing it, I think, to some extent with Mamdani now, is that we're currently living in the age of authenticity as performance. Neither of these guys hides the fact that he's selling something, but they're both very good at it. And that, in today's media ecosystem, is much more powerful than 100 endorsements from newspaper editorial boards that no one ever reads. Both of these guys have opponents who constantly underestimate them over and over. Trump was dismissed in 2016 and then again in 2024 as a sideshow in 2024 until he stood with one hand on the Bible when he first got elected and the other clutching the nuclear codes. Mamdani, likewise, was viewed as a long shot nuisance when he got in this race until he defeated a poll-blessed frontrunner. It turns out that there's power in being told you cannot win. It becomes a big part of the story, part of the brand. Both these guys have reshaped their parties, perhaps more than the parties would like to admit or can bring themselves to admit. Trump bent the Republican Party into a vessel for grievance, nationalism, and a cult of personality around him. Now Mamdani's on the coast of dragging the Democratic Party here in New York and nationally to the left to be part of his vision of the future. He's already causing a big national debate about what it means, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. What unites these two guys, perhaps most of all, is their command of narrative. In a world with a fragmented attention and lots of media and lots of memeified discourse, both these guys, Trump and Mamdani, they understand that a political figure must be a character. Trump had Crooked Hillary and Sleepy Joe and endless tales of rigged systems. Mamdani offers his own tales of grassroots uprisings, of billionaires and millionaires thriving at the expense of the people, of landlord lobbyists skulking in shadows, and of brave organizers triumphing against impossible odds. These two guys live in different universes, but they have the same method, storytelling. Again, they are not the same. Their politics, their values, their visions for the country, it couldn't be further apart. But style, my friends, is an important weapon, and having an agenda, even if it's a bumper sticker one, that speaks to the movement that you lead, that speaks to the moment that we're in, that is now what will triumph every time against conventional politics. That is what wins elections now. In another age, our politics was maybe more serious, Lincoln Douglas or Roosevelt fireside chats. Now it's more like an improv troupe than the Federalist Papers. We're watching two different one-man shows now in parallel, staged on opposite ends of the ideological theater, but each of them with the same stagecraft trick, breaking the fourth wall, acknowledging the audience, letting them feel smart and energized just for watching. In that way, Zohran Mamdani, probably the next mayor of New York, and Donald Trump, the president of the United States, are mirror images of each other in both the substance of what they talk about to try to address the people in the working class who feel frustrated, and in terms of form. Both of them are very talented postmodern performers. They're both great political storytellers, and both of them were underestimated until it was far too late for a confused and flummoxed establishment to figure out how to stop them. So both of them, in their own particular and peculiar idioms, they tell the audience, you're not just watching this, you're a part of this. You're part of a movement. Cue the curtain.